Yesterday, DL Hughley and Monique would trade contract and agreement receipts via Instagram in order to prove who was supposed to be the headliner for their show this past weekend at the Fox Theater in Detroit. First, Hughley posted his deal memo, which stated he was the headliner and the highest paid artist on the show. Monique responded with her performance agreement, which also stated that she was the headliner and closing act. Both comedians discredited each other's posts in their own statements. It seems like both comedians were told the same thing, and all this confusion over contracts makes one wonder why the comedians are going after one another and not the promoters. Today, we have our comedy hype analysts, Vanessa Fraction, Capone, and Pierre calling in along with very special guest, attorney Michelle, to give us their thoughts and reactions. So I want to go ahead and open up the floor, Pierre. I know we kind of touched on this yesterday, but now that we've kind of seen these contracts come to the forefront, what was your reaction when you saw that?
Yeah, now it's a little different because now you see the paperwork. Well, like I said, one says it's a deal memo, the other one says it's a contract. I don't know the difference between the two, and Michelle probably going to help us. I'm thinking deal memo is just something you put together. The contract's supposed to be more in state, law. But, like you said, Monique made her own, so I don't know, but someone signed off on it. If she wrote it, a contract, even if it's from her own company, and they signed off on it, then she would think it's legitimate. And if DL had that as a deal memo, he would think that it's going to continue to be like that. There wasn't going to be a major change as now he's not the headliner. You give him a deal memo and they turn around and say he's not the headliner. He's not closing the show. He's not getting paid the most. That's not normally how it goes. Well, deal memo is pretty much what a snapshot of what it's going to be at the end. It can have some changes, but that's a major change that he wouldn't accept. I put a lot of it on the promoter for letting both of them is signing off on both situations or letting both of them go to make both of them think they were headlining, they were ending the show. They can both be headliners like the Kings of Comedy where it's 4 headliners, but someone has to go last. It is what it is. And if someone feels like they need to be the last, another person, they need to be the last, that should have been that should have never been in that situation with the contracts being signed that way. So I think the promoter is highly at fault with this.
Absolutely. Now, Vanessa, I want to bring you in. I know we missed you yesterday, but I want to get your thoughts. Now that, we're seeing everything play out and these contracts are now visible to the public, what was your reaction to that?
My reaction is the same as it was yesterday, as it is today, that I don't think any of this needs to be something that we're talking about publicly. I can understand the frustration as a comedian, when you come into a situation and, things are supposed to be one way and then they're another. I think we all have, been through that, but it's the way in which we handle things is kind of my takeaway from all of this, you know what I'm saying? And I totally get her frustration, especially if it was one of those things, even when you saw it on the board, when you got there and you were last and then you heard somebody was catty and switched it up. I get that frustration. I will say, I don't agree with the way in which, you handle your frustration and your disagreement and so forth. And so, I think somebody, it's been said in comments, nobody wins when the family feuds, that kind of thing. And I do understand we all are individually contracted. And so we do have individual feelings and reputations and so forth to uphold and respect as well, because a lot of it sometimes has to do, and I think that's what she was speaking on when it came to Black women and so forth. A lot of times you deal with so much and all this pushback and people kind of putting you below something else. Sometimes you just get to that boiling point of, you know what, F this, your mama and everything else, you ain't gonna keep on, but is that, again, the way that you should do it? And I think that's what we're here talking about now. So
Capone, what are your reactions and thoughts to it now that we're, kind of seeing more things unfold in the public eye?
I think it was very childish for her to bring that up on stage. People don't pay to hear anybody complain at a comedy show. And whether you're in a situation, right or wrong, you deal with that behind the scenes, get up there, do your thing. If you're going to go on stage to perform. Don't go on stage, I'm supposed to be the last one and I'm supposed to do all of this and just it always seems to be the same situation. And I'm not taking up for DL because of whatever the situation is, but he did make a valid point. You got a problem with everybody and everybody cannot be wrong. It's the same problem with everybody. If you don't get your way, it's the highway. You had a choice. Don't go on stage. Bottom line, don't go on stage if you got to go up there and not bring the funny. Comedy is supposed to be comedians telling jokes, not spurting out the anger. That's the way I feel about it.
Pierre, let me ask you this. As Capone stated, Monique decided to use, her stage presence at the time to kind of address the situation. But now that has kind of transitioned into fully on social media. Now we're seeing them kind of go back and forth and releasing things on social media. Seeing this play out there, what are your thoughts or your reactions or your feelings to that? Seeing, two greats kind of hash it out on social media.
Like I said yesterday, and I agree with Capone, it was ridiculous. It's ridiculous to see these two titans going up there acting a fool on social media and people buying into it and liking it and clapping back and joining in on bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Is that what we as a society coming to, that we want to see our kings and queens fighting each other? The inner fighting of it, And like he said, for her to bring it up there like that, is that the way you handle it? I mean, we make choices. We all make choices in life, but I mean, it just seems like it's becoming redundant to do it like that. And I think it could have been another way to handle it. What is the cause of it? What's the good of it that came out of it? Her going up there yelling like that, screaming like that, just the fact, and then people call it, DL shows his, she shows hers. I mean, what's the good of it, man? There's other ways to handle it besides like that. I just feel it's totally different, another way to handle it. But people do as they feel like they, necessary, and they're grown, they're gonna do what they want to do. But to us to buy into it and clap and enjoy and laugh and girl, fuck DL's gay and fuck they is and she ain't shit and all that. Wow. Well, okay, you got what you wanted. She brought that in there so that, and for somebody to say, like, why are we talking about it? We're talking about because she brought it up. I mean, we can't do nothing, but she brought it up. I didn't know nothing about the contract. We didn't know about it until she brought it up like that, and in such a bad way, So we have to deal with it, we don't have to deal with it, but we deal with it. It's comedy hype. We talk about what's happening in comedy, and that happened in comedy. So that's why we're talking about it.
Vanessa, let me bring you in. I think I kind of understand how you feel about seeing it play out on social media, but do you think this is like a new norm, right? Because so many times when there are disputes, we're starting to see it more and more on social media. How do you feel, seeing them use the platform of Instagram to kind of hash this out and have that conversation, if you will?
Yeah, as you said, kind of in that my first response, I don't like it. I don't like it. She said what she said on stage, and he rebutted, and he could have chose It Takes Two to Tango. You know what I mean? So, he rebutted with them barbs, as we do. You know what I mean? But again, to see it played out on social media, that's not. Oof, I know it's tempting though. You know what I mean? Because especially when someone says something publicly, you want to have your space and your platform to give your side of it. And it's kind of hard to just go ahead and swallow that when people are, especially if your family's being attacked or you feel unjustly attacked and so forth, you feel like you got to come with yours too and let them know. And if that's your choice, that's cool. But, you can let it die out. If there's a lawsuit that needs to be taken care of, that you can keep on moving to the next project. These news cycles, we move through them pretty fast, you know what I mean, or whatever. So, is it really worth it? And so for me, I'm going to keep saying it's not. I haven't been attacked publicly. So, you know what I mean? Hopefully I'll stick to what I'm saying as well, you know what I mean, or whatever. But no, that's not, I don't like it. And I try hard not to, as Pierre was saying, people get into it and make the comments and hee-haw and kind of egg it on. And I try not to be one of those people either,
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to bring in Attorney Michelle as well. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you here and kind of get your perspective on this. One, I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about, yourself and exactly what field you do work in. But also, I want to ask the question of, we're looking at two things, right? We're looking at a deal memo and a contract. If you can kind of break those things down for us, just to kind of give us an understanding of what we're looking at.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Just to give a brief background, I am an attorney based in Atlanta, Georgia. I practice primarily with small businesses, creatives, artists, and I do trademark law as well as other areas of entertainment and business law. So I think this topic is definitely important, definitely relevant. It's unfortunate the way, the drama and things unfold on social media, on television and things of that nature, but it is good and a good opportunity for people to realize that if you are an artist or a creative working in a similar space, you definitely want to educate yourself on what your contract actually says, what it means, what your rights are, how do you negotiate and advocate for yourself, and how do you respond when something negative like this may happen to you, right? So regardless of who's right or wrong in a situation or, the validity of the certain pieces of evidence that have been released online, we first want to understand that the contract is going to be what we want to rely on. You know, at the end of the day, that is supposed to be, it's intended to be your final documentation of the terms of which both parties agree to. So, you know, I'm not sure who has the valid contract at the end of the day, but whoever has a contract, that is your final agreement. Both people should know what is in the contract, right? Both people should sign the contract, and there should always be some sort of communication and consideration, meaning there's an exchange, there's payment, there's some sort of understanding that you are being compensated in some kind of way to perform or to give the service, right? Now, a deal memo is intended, and I'm saying intended because a lot of people might be using or even misusing these documents in their own way. But a deal memo is supposed to be a bit of like a highlight cliff notes, if you would, something that's going to give a nice little summary of the key points. It should be the most important details, because a lot of times people are just trying to give people quickly the information that they feel is important. And then later they'll go get their attorney, their promoter, or their management team to put together a solid agreement to reflect what was highlighted in that deal memo.
So when we're looking at these two, which one of these would be honored, if it does go to court, or if it is moved forward, which one of these would be honored?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because these types of situations, unfortunately, once they get messy like this, we have to look at a lot of different things. So I'm not sure that there would be a clear, obvious, cut and dry answer, but I would say typically you should look at the final agreement. Some contracts and most contracts will have what are called boilerplate pieces of information at the end. That's the point where, you see all that jargon at the end of your contract. A lot of people don't read it because it's generic. It typically says the same thing in every single person's agreement. It might be titled something like entire agreement or severability or something like that, so that people know that, hey, if we had prior conversations, if I called you on the phone and I said something, and then later I emailed you and said something else, and then there was another conversation or a text message, and then we came and drafted a final agreement. We want this final agreement to be the one that's enforceable, because we know how telephone works. We know how miscommunication can happen. And we don't want there to be too many pieces of information that have misled the parties that are agreeing. So ideally, we would like for that final contract to be the final agreement. And ideally, we would have liked for both of these parties to have had some sort of conversation, had there been any apparent confusion before, showing up at the venue and getting up on stage.
Let me ask you a question.
Well, hold on, Pierre. Let me go to Vanessa, because I know I saw her earlier, and then Pierre, I'm going to come straight to you.
No problem.
I think sometimes the confusion is, and I don't know if this is a question or a comment statement, as individually contracted artists and businesses and so forth, we don't get to see the other people that are on your show's contract. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much, if Capone and Pierre and I are on a show together, I don't know how much Capone and Pierre are getting paid, or what all is entailed in your contract. A lot of times now they do put the what you call, and I guess Capone and Pierre can speak on that too, if they put the lineup. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes that's something you might ask, you know what I'm saying, within that, because that does help you to understand how much you're getting paid, you know what I mean? Or if you've reached the number that you asked for and you are getting paid the number that you want, you kind of don't care what order, as long as I'm getting my money. And I think that speaks to individual contracts and the way that you like to do your business. So I guess I'm just saying that sometimes it's hard because we have individual contracts and they don't all say the same thing.
Right. And that's why, Vanessa, you bring up a good point that you should always ask, because you want to feel like you're advocating for your rights and advocating for how much money you feel like you deserve. And how do you justify that if you don't even understand what you signed up for? So I would always encourage people to just go ahead and ask, get as much information as you can, knowing that you may not get all the information that you need and want, but at least, ask the questions that you can to see if they say, oh yeah, let me go check on that, or I can get you the lineup, or let me clarify, I'm not actually sure if they've told somebody else X, Y, and Z, because that way you can say, actually, this isn't for me. And if it is such a big deal to you that you need to be X, Y, and Z in the lineup, now you can make the decision if you want to move forward.
Pierre, I'll come to you.
All right. Like she said, the deal memo, I'm guessing we'll say it doesn't hold as much weight as the contract does. I'm kind of getting that feeling a little bit. But trust and believe, I've been in this business for 30 years. All the things that DL wrote in his deal memo is what he wants in that contract. You yank out anything differently, his money, his positioning, any of that, DL won't be on that show. I'm just being honest with you. So if you have that in the contract, if you didn't sign a contract, if that was his deal memo, He was thinking, that's what I'm going to be doing. This is the scenario. I'm getting paid this much money. If it's a deal memo and I'm not really getting paid this much money, at the end, you're going to say, ha, I said 40. We're really going to give you 10,000 because it's just a deal memo. If that's what's happening, I believe there's a contract he either signed or that deal memo to him and his crew was considered, and the promoter, that is the contract. That's what I'm thinking. If it's something different they got to sign, it's still going to bring the same major elements on that. Now, Monique had her own, from her own company, whatever, she signed it. She said what she wanted. They said, okay, I think the auspices and the problem is the promoter. If the promoter told both of them that they can both end the show, both making decisions, then the promoter's at fault. And if the promoter's at fault, for Monique to get at him, again, I wasn't there. He's saying, hey, this is my thing. This is what I do. Now, you can tell me go second before you. I'm not going second before you. That's not what I wrote. I signed up for. And I'm not going to do it. And she could say, I'm not doing it either. It could have been a stalemate back there. However, whatever could happen. But to say, nigga, you need to go first, and you need to go first because mine says that, who wins on that situation? But I don't think DL, I think what DL showed was what it is. You can call it not deal memo, not the real deal, but he wasn't going to change that.
No, I like that you brought that up because that brings a really important issue going back to the contract questions is that when you were asking like who would win, those are the kind of factors that somebody would need to examine because a lot of times we still have things such as customary practice. That's essentially like what is customary within this industry might actually have some weight, even though it might not be typically enforceable in a different situation, right? So going to a nail salon and saying that there was an agreement versus standing up on a national platform and doing a comedy show, completely different scenario. And artists have what they have industry norms and customary practice that they adhere to. So they may actually be or feel like they're in compliance, even if that's not what the contract said. So Pierre's point is totally valid. And it would have to be something that has to be weighed with everything else, to come up with the best solution. So both parties could, equally be right at the end of the day. And, I want to also clarify that this is not legal advice. We're not really taking sides. We don't really know who it well, I'm not taking sides. Y'all can take sides, but I'm going to do the legal thing and just speak on the actual just like elements of legality here to consider because there really isn't a right answer unless we go and really dig in. But he is right. Management, legal, promoters, they have a responsibility too because they're supposed to be their advocate and represent the artist or the client, or at least try to do what's best for the artist, or at least give them the correct information, on a basic kind of like bare minimum. So I don't know who's to blame, but there seems to be a lot of miscommunication here. And best practices for anybody moving forward is to always clarify. And even if you make really clear demands and you have the same standard in your deal memos, just make sure to be like, hey, just following up again to make sure that the contract says what that deal memo said, or it follows our original conversation. And someone could say, you know what, actually, I didn't even check. Let me go check on that for you, because that's probably what happened here.
Right. And I think that's a great segue to bring in Capone now. Come on, Capone, I know you wear several hats in the business, in this business as well as others, but I know, promoting is one of them or has been. So I want to ask, from your perspective, when we're looking at a lineup, how do you decide who's a headliner, whether that's your show or if you're helping putting on for another show? How do you decide who's the headliner?
Several different things. One, who's the draw? That's number one. Number two, who's the funniest? Now, technically, somebody with a track record of being funny all the time is usually the one that closes out the show. There are those who are funny and might have a good night that might be funnier than the headliner. But let's backtrack a little bit, because I've been in this situation several times myself, where on contract, there is a headliner that's supposed to be so-called have a bigger name than myself. But we get to the venue and the headliner, oh, I didn't know Capone was on the show. Y'all didn't tell me Capone was on the show, man. I can't follow his energy. Whatever excuses they have, they come up with. Then the promoter comes up and asks you, hey, Capone, man, he don't want to go on last. Well, that's not my problem. And several times it becomes a quick money hit right there. Man, if I give you another $5,000, can you close last? Which put the promoter in a bad situation because he's supposed to headline. And a lot of times these cats don't want to follow certain cats. And so they start complaining and contracts is thrown out the window. So on several different occasions, most of the time, you go with popularity. It's not always the funniest guy, but popularity brings a headline in. And you go with, secondly, the guy who's funny and drawing in. You know,
So
both in this party, both of them are drawers. They both drawers. But I just feel, and this is my strong feeling, that Monique should have not got on that stage if she was so cold-heartedly wanting to be the headliner and got up there and did nothing. If you're a headliner, prove by your work. Go up there, rip the stage up, and then next time you got something, it's the same situation all the time. When you had the beef with Netflix, you know, take the money, do what you can do, and then you can get more money. You're not showing and proving nothing. You're just complaining. And I don't think that's professional.
Now, speaking of headlining, you bring a great point. So Ricky Smiley also took to, you know, his platform to speak on this as well. And he kind of touched on that. So I want to play that clip and then I want to come back to the cast to get your thoughts on that. So let's take a look at that clip.
And if the order says Ricky Smiley go first, D-Ray Davis go second, that's what the order is. And you have to respect the order. Because if it come down to it, okay, if can't nobody agree, what's on the paper? The contract say headliner because we are headliners. Headliner, but are you headline? You can co-headline. But somebody got to go first. And somebody got to go second. Somebody got to go third. Hey, I don't want to go first. Do anybody want to switch the order? No, Ricky Smiley, we don't want to switch the order. Well, my ass going first. And let me get this money and go home.
So, you know, that's a little bit from Ricky Smiley, but now I want to get your thoughts on it as well. Pierre, I'll come to you first. Why do you think headlining, or can you help me understand and the audience understand, why is headlining so important?
Well, it's funny you talked to Ricky Smiley because he called me yesterday and we had a long discussion about this. I think right before he did this. Let me talk about the situation, the headline with her and him. D.L. Hughley is one of the top-notch comics out here. It's not a disrespectful thing to go first. The audience wouldn't have judged it. I'm just being honest. The audience wouldn't have been like, oh, she went on before D.L. It wouldn't have been that. So I think really only thing that played part in that was ego. You still get the same money. Her money wasn't going to change if she won before DL or after DL. It was no, the money wasn't. The audience wouldn't have cared. Really, they wanted to see her go up and do her thing. Her fans would want to see it. But to go last, it only is about ego. And to go before DL, it was not a negative thing. So to me, like Ricky said, you go to a venue and the order's there. And now if you don't like the order, then you either get it changed. If you don't get it changed, then don't go on stage. But to go on stage and be pissed off about the order, tell everybody about the order, I mean, what is that really doing? I mean, they came to see a comedy show. So when it comes to headlining, we all come together. We just pick who, the promoter picks who it is, and that's what it is. Maybe the comics might discuss it amongst themselves. Say, hold on, promoter, we just talk. Can we go before so and so? Because my act turn hits this one and he hits that one right behind me. And the promoter might say, all right, cool, or he might say no. But there's an order already going there, and that's what it is. But you go in there telling somebody what time you going, where you going, and all that positioning to a promoter, that's kind of heavy.
Vanessa, I want to bring that same question to you. When we're looking at headliners as audience members, sometimes we just don't know. We don't know exactly what that means. So, to you or in your experience, why is headlining so important?
Well, as we grew up in comedy, it was all about the respect, as Capone and Pierre have said, and all of us as comedians, understand that, you work hard for what we're doing, you know what I mean? And as it was stated, usually it's the funniest person that's going last or the one that has the most draw. Now, things have definitely changed and they always do, you know what I mean, or whatever. But before it was that importance of the respect and I'm going last because I'm going to crush this piece. And I think a lot of us, I know I certainly have, it's more about the business of it. Is someone getting more money to close? If that's the case, then I need that same money if we're going to switch it and make me close, you know what I mean, or whatever. Do I have to do more time? You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. And more time can go both ways, because sometimes as a headliner, I deserve my time and I want to do my 40 minutes. I don't want to do 20 minutes. My fans came out to see and paid to see me do this extension. Sometimes it doesn't matter. You're like, hey, you know what? I'd rather do less time. And sometimes we're doing all the same. You know what I mean? So I think it all just depends. And I think most of us have said it's just the way that you're choosing to handle it. As Pierre said just now, a lot of times if stuff ain't right in the business, you'll say, hey, look, I'm not going to go out. because some of this business hasn't been taken care of, and you don't want to be giving fans back their money and all that kind of thing. So I think that a lot of us have understood that it's about the fans and giving them a good show. I don't care kind of where you put me in the show, except for if you promoted me as a headliner, then some of my fans, you know how we do, they come in late. So they don't expect me to be first. So if you promoted that I'm going toward the end, they know they can lag a little bit, maybe go out, get a drink. And so you want to, again, give it to the expectations of the fans or whatever. But most of the time it's not really like that. You know what I'm saying? And as long as you're doing a great show, the fans will come and tell you, Chad, you should have went last, honey. You killed that thing or whatever. You know, again, I'm giggles over grievances. You know what I'm saying? We are definitely there to put on a great show. You know what I'm saying? We're not here to air our grievances. There is a place to do that. And I just don't think that that's, especially in this case, the stage. There are certain grievances that we do because we do have a platform. But I think this was simple enough, in a sense, that this could have been handled a bit differently, you know. So.
Absolutely. And I love to see that on a shirt, by the way.
Oh, giggles over grievances.
There you go. Yeah.
We'll go for it.
Capone, you know, I kind of see you nodding your head over there. I want to ask that same question to you. When we're looking at headliners, you know, why is that so important?
I mean, Vanessa said it very well. This is something when you start this business that you look to become. But when things change, it change. And for me, you know, I've been in here so long that it's not about the comedians. Comedians really don't show love to comedians. It's about the audience. The audience paid to see you. You give a show to the audience. Whoever goes behind me, it is what it is. I've heard and I've experienced throughout my course of the years, comedians, yo, man, can you slow it down? You know, the headliner don't want you to do this joke and do that joke. Man, I'm going to be me. I'm going to give this audience what I got to give them. If I agreed upon the money, that's what I'm looking for.
But my last thing I won't say is the fact that you said headliner and headlining. Monique's contract said she goes last also. So it did say where her positioning. As DL said, he closes the show. So they both had closers on their contract. That's where the promoter should have not let that go. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So
and I mean, in my personal,
I
was going to kind of like answer a few of the things as I've heard and just go in order. So
sorry.
That's a really good one, because I was like thinking a bunch of things. I probably should have wrote it down, but Ricky Smiley, when he said, you know, the differentiating between headliner and headlining, again, is a really interesting example of what I was talking about with industry standards or industry norms, because like you might interpret a word a certain way, but if artists kind of know that headliners don't necessarily mean first, it just means, you know, hey, you're a big deal, you're a well-known established comedian, and you're a headliner, meaning you're one of the best of the show or whatever, right? Versus I am the first or last person is a big difference. So kind of important thing to make sure you understand the difference and you don't make any assumptions. Second thing I will say is that, you know, going back to responsibilities, you got to make sure you really understand, is the promoter your promoter? Or are they the venue's promoter? Like, you can't really hold certain people accountable if they're not really your people that you're paying to be on your team and advocate for you. Because if it's the job of the promoter to just make sure it's a good show, that's what they're going to do. They're not going to play favorites or just give in to one comedian's requests, right? And then last, with Pierre, what you were just saying, it's like performance. Performance is the other thing that can either make or break a contract. And what I mean by performance is literally doing what you said you were going to do. So even when you don't sign sometimes, or you don't finalize the agreement, but you actually end up doing what the agreement said, a court might say that, okay, that's binding because you went ahead and did it. Just because you didn't sign it, you shouldn't have gone on stage and performed. Also, the lack of performance could then also go the same way. Like, if you don't do what you said you're going to do, you don't really have any grievance, right? So it's kind of this, that's why it goes back to the same thing that all lawyers always say. The answer is it depends, because there are like 70 something factors here that we would have to analyze a little bit further and get accurate statements that aren't fueled by, you know, emotion and ego and some of these other things that we as people just feel naturally, right? So
But my last thing I won't say is the fact that you said headliner and headlining. Monique's contract said she goes last also. So it did say where her positioning. As DL said, he closes the show. So they both had closers on their contract. That's where the promoter should have not let that go. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So
and I mean, in my personal, Yeah, in my personal opinion, that would be something where the teams, the individual management would have sort of, repaired that grievance, whatever that looked like. If that meant the next show that they're both booked at, they're going to switch it. Right. If that means somebody gets kind of like a little under the table compensation, and I don't mean under the table in an unethical way, but just behind the scenes, not so public. Yeah, not so loud and visible online, but more like a private conversation that we're like, we messed up. Somebody messed up and they apologize. And how can we fix that for you? Can we highlight you in our next event? Can we do a collaboration to kind of feature you somewhere to kind of, even it out, right? Even out the mistake. That's usually what we like to see as attorneys. Like privately, we figure it out without it becoming even a lawsuit.
Right.
Michelle, I can't tell you how much value you've definitely added to this conversation. We appreciate you being here and giving us insight. And again, it is not advice. It is not legal advice. It is just insight. But I do want to, give you the opportunity of how people can follow you or, reach out to you if they did need your services.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you once again. This is definitely an interesting conversation and a great opportunity to hop on here and chat with you all. So thank you for that. You guys can follow me online. I'm not as famous as these people, but I am the Boho Business Guide on Instagram. And you can check out my law firm. It's OMI Legal, and that's omilegal.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Attorney Michelle, for calling and chiming in, as well as to our cast. Thank you for chiming in on this one. I know it's a touchy topic, but I think we're able to give, more insight to people that may not be privy to these type of conversations. So thank y'all so much. You heard from us. Now we want to hear from you in the comments below. What are your thoughts now that both contracts have been released? For Comedy Hype News, I'm Symphony Thompson.
Do you know the comedy culture? Play Comedy Hype, the game. Out now.